The air in the private chambers of the late Ferdinand VII is a suffocating shroud, thick with the cloying scent of embalming fluids, stale incense, and the palpable, crushing dread of a kingdom teetering on the precipice of chaos. The king, the tyrant who had bled Spain dry for 2 decades, is finally dead. Yet for you, the royal physician, a man whose hands have navigated the delicate line between life and death for decades, the true horror of your duty is only now unfolding. You've been summoned to this hallowed yet utterly defiled space for a task so bizarre, so unprecedented, so profoundly unsettling, that the very foundations of your sanity begin to crack under the strain. Queen Regent Maria Cristina, a spectral figure draped in the deepest mourning black, her face a mask of profound grief that barely conceals a deeper, more chilling terror, stands before you. Her voice, a fragile, desperate whisper, cuts through the morbid silence like a shard of ice, delivering a request that turns your blood to glacial slush in your veins. Preserve him, doctor. Preserve it. Your hands, usually surgeon steady, capable of the most intricate and delicate procedures, now tremble uncontrollably, a betraying tremor that mirrors the frantic, terrified beat of your own heart. You force yourself forward, each step a leaden weight, a march towards an unspeakable destiny, as you approach the opulent, death-shrouded bed. There, beneath the heavy, shimmering silk sheets, lies the corpulent, almost obscene form of Ferdinand VII. Even in death, the man who had terrorized Spain for 2 decades, whose cruelty was legendary, whose paranoia was a suffocating fog, seems to mock you from beyond the grave. His bloated face, a grotesque, sneering caricature of power, a final, defiant sneer. But it's not his face that rivets your gaze, not the vacant, sightless stare of a lifeless monarch. It's what lies hidden, concealed, beneath the silken shroud, the unspeakable thing, the anatomical monstrosity that defined his reign as much as his boundless cruelty, his crippling paranoia, or his endless, treacherous betrayals. The grotesquely oversized, bizarrely shaped endowment that was simultaneously the source of his deepest, most agonizing shame and his most twisted, perverse pride. As you steel your trembling hands, forcing them to obey, preparing for the macabre, unholy preservation process, your mind reels, a maelstrom of terrifying whispers echoing through the cold, stone palace corridors. Stories, dark and unsettling, of specially crafted cushions, of royal bedchambers echoing with the muffled, desperate screams of terrified wives, of desperate, futile attempts to produce an heir despite nature's cruel, twisted joke. With a sickening jolt, a cold dread that chills you to the bone seeps into your very essence. You realize, with horrifying clarity, you're not just preserving mere flesh and blood. You are preserving the physical embodiment of a reign that was itself deformed, oversized, and ultimately, utterly destructive to everything it touched, a reign as monstrous as the very secret you are now forced to confront. Before we plunge deeper into these forgotten, unsettling stories of survival and suffering, into the very heart of this historical darkness, if the hidden, unsettling truths of history grip your imagination, if you crave the secrets whispered in the shadows of the past, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content that dares to peel back the layers of history's darkest, most uncomfortable corners. And please, comment below to let me know where you're listening from. It's truly incredible how we connect across time and space, united by our shared, insatiable, perhaps even morbid, curiosity about the past. Ferdinand VII, born under a shadow of decay and damnation. To truly comprehend the monster Ferdinand VII became, to dissect the very essence of his tyranny, to understand the twisted roots of his cruelty, you must first grasp the chilling, inescapable reality. He was born cursed, not by ancient witchcraft or divine wrath, not by some mythical malevolence, but by the poisonous, suffocating, inbred legacy of centuries of royal decay. The Spanish Habsburgs and Bourbons, a lineage obsessed with maintaining a pure bloodline. A delusion of grandeur had spent generations intermarrying cousins to cousins, uncles to nieces, weaving a genetic tapestry of inevitable doom, a tapestry stained with madness and deformity. The result? A genetic nightmare that manifested in everything from crippling mental instability to horrifying, grotesque physical deformities that shocked even the most hardened physicians. Ferdinand emerged from this toxic, stagnant bloodline like a living, breathing embodiment of royal putrefaction. Born at the sprawling, austere, and perpetually shadowed Escorial Palace on October 14, 1784, he was the unfortunate product of Charles IV and Maria Louisa of Parma, a couple whose own marriage was a grotesque, incestuous arrangement between first cousins. The genetic lottery had been rigged from the start, a cruel cosmic joke played upon a royal house, and Ferdinand, the future King of Spain, would pay the ultimate price in the most intimate, humiliating, and ultimately devastating way imaginable. His very existence was a testament to the rot within the monarchy. The royal anomaly, a secret unveiled in horrifying, unflinching detail. As he transitioned from a sickly, withdrawn child to a sullen, resentful adolescent, the horrifying, undeniable truth became clear, a truth that could no longer be hidden behind courtly euphemisms. Nature had played a particularly cruel, unspeakable joke on the future monarch. His member began developing in ways that defied all known medical understanding, grotesque deviations from the natural order, a biological anomaly that terrified those who witnessed it. By his teenage years, the hushed whispers among the court physicians grew into terrified murmurs, then into outright horrified discussions about the royal anomaly. A dong so massive, so bizarrely shaped, so utterly alien in its proportions, that it seemed to belong to another species entirely, a monstrous appendage on a human frame. Contemporary medical records, meticulously hidden away in the deepest, dustiest corners of Vatican archives for centuries, offer a clinical yet utterly disturbing glimpse into the raw, horrifying reality of Ferdinand's condition. Dr. Francisco Flores, the king's personal physician, a man whose hand must have trembled as he committed these shocking observations to paper, penned notes that convey the sheer, unadulterated horror of what he witnessed. His Majesty's member, Flores wrote, his elegant script betraying a profound, visceral tremor, a silent scream of disbelief, presents a most unusual, indeed, a monstrous configuration. The base measures no more than the width of a man's thumb, a mere prelude to the horror. Yet it expands to a circumference that defies all natural proportion, a circumference that beggars belief, a grotesque ballooning of flesh. The length exceeds that of any recorded human specimen, measuring near to 10 inches in its natural, flaccid state and growing considerably, terrifyingly larger when aroused, becoming a truly formidable and unnatural mass. Most concerning, however, is the peculiar, unnatural curvature and the presence of what appear to be additional tissue growths, bulbous and unsightly, that serve no discernible biological function. A grotesque mockery of anatomy, a testament to the inbred decay of his lineage. The implications for Ferdinand's future as a husband and, more critically, as a father, were immediately and terrifyingly obvious. Normal, intimate relations would be an absolute impossibility without significant, agonizing medical intervention and specialized, custom-built equipment. The royal craftsmen, usually tasked with crafting delicate jewels and ornate crowns, found themselves secretly commissioned for a far more grotesque, humiliating endeavor: to create what they euphemistically called marital aids, specially designed cushions and supports, monstrous, custom-fitted contraptions meant to allow Ferdinand to function sexually without causing serious, perhaps even fatal, injury to his future wives. These were not tools of pleasure, but instruments of necessity, born of a king's profound, agonizing deformity, a symbol of his cursed existence. The psychological scars of a monarch, a soul twisted into tyranny. But the physical challenges, as monstrous and humiliating as they were were only a fraction of the problem. Ferdinand's condition had psychological ramifications that clawed far beyond the confines of the bedroom, reaching into the deepest recesses of his being, twisting his very soul into something dark, vindictive, and utterly unrecognizable. He became consumed by a desperate, all-consuming obsession with potions and elixirs, each promising to normalize his anatomy or miraculously enhance his fertility, a futile quest for a cure that would never come. Court alchemists and foreign physicians, a parade of charlatans and quacks drawn by the scent of royal desperation, were secretly smuggled into Madrid, each peddling their fantastical miracle cures that inevitably failed with agonizing predictability, leaving Ferdinand more desperate than before. The prince squandered unimaginable fortunes on these useless, fraudulent remedies. He consumed vile, repugnant mixtures of ground rhinoceros horn, powdered pearls, and rare exotic herbs, all supposedly meant to regulate his royal essence, to bring his body back into a semblance of normalcy. Some concoctions were meant to shrink his member to normal proportions. Others claimed to enhance his virility despite its monstrous, aberrant shape. All of them were useless, a cruel charade that only deepened his despair. Yet Ferdinand's raw, agonizing desperation, his profound yearning for normalcy, made him an easy, pathetic mark for every con artist and charlatan who whispered false promises of a cure, preying on his deepest insecurities. Ferdinand VII, born into privilege, surrounded by paranoia. From the moment he took his first breath in 1784, whispers circulated within the Spanish court, rumors that this infant prince was touched by unnatural desire. Midwives spoke of strange birthmarks and an eerie stillness in his eyes. His mother, Queen Maria Luisa of Parma, reportedly fainted at the sight of him. One palace priest, his words trembling with unspoken dread, wrote, "This child, though noble in blood, carries something ancestral, darker than Bourbon lineage." Heir to the Bourbon dynasty, Ferdinand was raised behind silk curtains, shielded from public view. But even as a boy, his peculiar obsessions, anatomical sketches, whispered questions about bodily delight, and a disturbing fascination with injured animals left his tutors deeply unsettled. While most royal children were groomed in philosophy and diplomacy, Ferdinand was often found alone, clutching dolls he had meticulously dismembered and then grotesquely reassembled. His favorite pastime? Carving disturbing shapes into soft wax and melting them over fire, only to press the hot, malleable forms against his own skin. One tutor, his sanity frayed, fled the court after reportedly discovering erotic drawings under the prince's pillow, scenes far beyond the comprehension of a 12-year-old boy. By the time he reached adolescence, court physicians noted unusual swelling, allegedly prompting the young prince to demand custom-fitted trousers. Whispered rumors, barely audible in the hallowed halls, labeled him el exagerado, the exaggerated one. Teenage Ferdinand was infatuated not with noble women, but with the chilling idea of domination. He collected etchings of prisoners in chains, had a miniature dungeon constructed in his playroom, and often demanded that servants kneel to royalty in all ways. Some believe his sexual awakening was marked by a scandal involving a stable boy. Though no formal inquiry was allowed, the boy vanished without a trace. His family received a large sum and left Madrid forever, their silence bought with coin and fear. Ferdinand married 4 times, each union a tragic chapter in his twisted reign. His first wife, Maria Antonia of Naples, died mysteriously at just 21. Officially, it was tuberculosis, but palace insiders spoke of overwhelming stress, profound fear, and bleeding from within. Each wife endured his cruel routines, forced dress-up games, humiliating nightly inspections, and a chilling refusal to consummate unless bizarre conditions were met. One demand included being blindfolded, bound, and reciting lines from Spanish tragedy plays as he watched. Maria Isabel, his second wife, supposedly once screamed from their chambers, her voice raw with terror. "This is not love. This is a ritual of beasts." By now, Ferdinand was king, but Spain trembled not just from political unrest, but from the unspeakable horrors that went on in the royal bedchambers. Ministers begged him to produce an heir. Physicians were summoned to examine his virility, their faces pale with dread. One horrified doctor, after his examination, wrote in his private notes, "It is not a man's body I tend to. It is a relic, oversized, grotesque, a bodin even to itself." Ferdinand wept, screamed, and accused his wives of witchcraft when they could not bear children. He truly believed the devil cursed his bloodline and even ordered a goat slaughtered during intercourse to purify the act. Ferdinand's sexual dominance mirrored his political tyranny. He crushed liberal uprisings with ruthless force and reinstated the dreaded Inquisition. But behind closed doors, in the most intimate spaces, he was equally, chillingly cruel. Wives were not lovers. They were objects of submission, playthings for his twisted desires. One chambermaid recalled how the king made his third wife, Maria Josefa, remain on all fours during meals, barking answers to his questions. He called it noble training. The court learned not to question him, not to defy his monstrous whims. Ministers burned medical logs. Servants signed lifetime silence pacts, their lives forfeit if they spoke a word. Only in foreign courts did tales of the perverted king begin to spread, whispered in hushed tones of horror. Ferdinand's fourth wife, Maria Cristina of the Two Sicilies, entered the royal palace young, hopeful, and devout. But what she discovered behind the velvet curtains of the royal bedchamber drove her to near madness. Forced to endure nightly performances, ritualistic games with masks, ropes, and holy relics desecrated in cruel parody, she wrote in her private diary, her hand shaking, "He is no husband, but a man possessed by the theater of pain." Palace insiders claim she attempted escape more than once scaling a wall before being dragged back by guards, her spirit broken. Eventually she grew silent, withdrawn, and ghost-like. Whispers say she lost her voice from screaming, her vocal cords shredded by terror. In the western wing of the palace, Ferdinand maintained a secret room known only as El Gabinet, the cabinet. Described by one fleeing servant as a museum of nightmares, it contained wax figures of dismembered saints, a chilling collection of torture tools, and paintings of men and women contorted in ecstasy and agony, a grotesque tableau. Foreign ambassadors who glimpsed it by accident were horrified, their faces blanching. One Austrian count wrote, his words filled with disgust, "Spain is ruled not by a king, but by a sadistic playwright staging his own descent into hell." The servants believed the palace was cursed, haunted by the king's depravity. At night, soft moans and strange murmurs echoed through stone halls. Some claimed to see barefoot figures roaming in white gowns, former wives, perhaps, trapped in sorrow, forever bound to their tormentor. A priest brought to bless the palace fainted in the royal chapel and later abandoned the priesthood entirely, his faith shattered. The queen's seamstress reportedly cut her own fingers after sewing one too many cursed robes, garments imbued with the king's dark essence. One of Ferdinand's most notorious creations was his bed, a monstrous structure carved with nude figures in chains and agony, a twisted monument to his desires. Constructed from rare ebony and gleaming gold, the headboard featured twin cherubs gagged and bound, their innocent forms perverted. Visitors to the palace who glimpsed it by chance were shaken to their core. One wrote, his hand trembling as he penned the words, "I felt I had entered a church where blasphemy was the only prayer." Ferdinand developed an unrelenting fixation with the human body, not in its beauty, but in its dissection, its vulnerability. He summoned surgeons to explain cadavers in gruesome detail and commissioned artists to paint grotesque interpretations of what lay beneath the skin. Wax models of genitals, male and female, were arranged like trophies in his personal cabinet, a perverse collection. He believed that physical dominance came from understanding every fold, every nerve of submission. At times, he would request his wives to stand naked while he pointed out their muscles as if lecturing to an invisible, captive audience. Ferdinand surrounded himself with what he chillingly called his court of curiosities, a collection of dwarfs, disfigured entertainers, and eunuchs. These individuals were dressed in lace and velvet, paraded during royal dinners, and forced to reenact twisted pantomimes where the king himself would play both villain and victim. Reveling in their discomfort, he laughed hardest when they wept. Many of them vanished without record, swallowed by the palace's dark secrets. One surviving jester later wrote, his words etched with pain, "We were not his fools, we were his toys, and like toys we broke." In a sealed chamber beneath the palace, Ferdinand created his velvet theater, a hidden stage lined with oppressive red drapes and a false confessional. Here, he acted out sinful performances with unwilling courtesans dressed as clergy, saints, and sinners. Everything was ritualized: the donning of robes, the burning of incense, mock sermons filled with blasphemy. Foreign visitors were sometimes invited to witness these depraved spectacles. Those who declined simply disappeared. One French ambassador vanished after denouncing the king's godless debauchery. His body was never found. In a chilling display of absolute power, Ferdinand had a mechanical chair designed for his fourth wife, Maria Cristina. Bound at the wrists and ankles, she was subjected to endless lectures on morality while he read poetry aloud, naked, his grotesque form exposed. Witnesses said he wept during these sessions, not out of remorse, but theatrical self-pity, a performance for his captive audience. "I am cursed," he would whisper, "but so must you be to love me." Maria Cristina's mental state deteriorated, her spirit slowly eroding. She reportedly tried to swallow pins, a desperate plea for oblivion. One nun who tended to her later said, "She died while breathing, her soul having departed long before her body." Perhaps the most unnerving creation was his gallery of eyes, a hallway lined with portraits containing only the disembodied eyes of his past lovers, servants, and even animals. He claimed they watched him, judged him, kept him awake with their silent accusations. Some nights he would walk the corridor in full regalia, muttering apologies or curses to the painted eyes. He ordered guards to never speak of the gallery. Yet one guard who did later hanged himself in the barracks, driven mad by the secret. Mirrors were placed in every room Ferdinand occupied, some angled from above, others from below, creating distorted reflections. He believed reflections revealed the soul's true shame. During feasts, he positioned guests so they were forced to watch themselves eat. Their own gluttony reflected back at them. In his private quarters, orgies were conducted in a room filled with warped glass, where bodies twisted into grotesque forms. "Let the soul see the filth it desires," he said, his voice a low growl. Survivors described it as a place of madness, where pleasure turned to horror and sanity dissolved. Ferdinand invented rituals where he cleansed his lovers with fire, not literal flames, but heated stones, steaming cloths, or metal rods pressed near the skin. These acts, he claimed, purged impurity, a twisted form of purification. More than one victim suffered agonizing burns. Medical journals never recorded the treatments, their pages blank with fear. Royal physicians feared for their lives, knowing that to document was to condemn themselves. One court nurse wrote anonymously to a French journal, her words a desperate plea for recognition. "Spain's king is both a priest and a pyromaniac." Ferdinand was obsessed with youth, not in desire, but in control, in breaking the innocent. He built a chamber, painted with idyllic fairy tale murals, where noble children were brought and told chilling tales of punishment, loyalty, and absolute obedience. It's unclear whether any direct abuse occurred, but rumors suggest at least one child was found crying blood, their innocence shattered. A painter who worked on the murals claimed, his voice haunted, I was told to make joy, but it felt like a cage. Ferdinand maintained a disturbing collection of letters allegedly written to him by the dead. He insisted his past wives, unborn children, and even Judas Iscariot sent him messages from beyond the grave. These were pinned to his bed curtains and read aloud before sleep, a nightly ritual of madness. The handwriting often matched his own, a terrifying testament to his fractured mind. His confessor, Father Louis, begged him to destroy them, to seek absolution. Instead, Ferdinand excommunicated the priest and had him arrested for treason, silencing dissent with brutal efficiency. To unite erotic power and national pride, Ferdinand once conducted a bizarre sacrilegious ceremony, where he spilled his own blood on the Spanish flag while shouting oaths of dominance. Witnesses say he carved a crown into his chest using a gold-plated dagger, a self-inflicted wound for his twisted coronation. He passed out from blood loss, a faint smile on his lips, but upon waking, he demanded applause, reveling in his own depravity. Foreign dignitaries, horrified, hastily left the palace. Some never returned, their careers, perhaps their lives, forever altered by what they witnessed. Among Ferdinand's most disturbing obsessions was a life-size mechanical doll he commissioned from a reclusive Swiss inventor. Known to his inner circle as La Marquesa, the automaton resembled a pale, silent noblewoman with jointed limbs and glass eyes that blinked unnervingly, a chilling simulacrum of life. He dined with it, spoke to it, and many believe he used it to act out fantasies too grotesque, too unspeakable for a living participant. When questioned, Ferdinand simply replied, his voice devoid of emotion, "She doesn't betray me. She listens." Rumors swirled that he preferred it to his queen, finding solace in its unyielding silence. Ferdinand assembled a secret choir of monks, castrati, and veiled women, who sang haunting chants late at night beneath the palace chapel. These were not hymns of praise, but dark psalms, filled with pain and yearning, a mournful dirge for lost souls. No outsider was allowed to attend. One maid who crept close said the lyrics spoke of bleeding lilies and thrones of lust. After being caught, she vanished within a week, another victim of the king's secrets. A British envoy later described it as a choir of spirits lamenting their own imprisonment, a chillingly accurate assessment. In a locked room called La Cámara de Hierro, the Iron Chamber, Ferdinand kept a council of torment, a group of sadists, ex-inquisitors, and rogue doctors who advised him on discipline techniques, devising new methods of agony. Records suggest they developed custom tools, silken restraints soaked in absinthe, scalpels shaped like crosses, even perfume laced with narcotics. Their purpose? To blur pleasure and agony, to find the precise point where sensation became torment. His fourth wife once screamed for 6 hours, a continuous, horrifying sound. Her voice never returned. Once a year, Ferdinand staged a grotesque masked ball open only to his most depraved allies. Nobles, artists, and merchants arrived dressed as beasts, angels, or demons, their true identities hidden behind masks of perversion. The event began with poetry, but ended in ritualistic orgies, a descent into primal chaos. Each guest was required to pledge eternal silence or face exile, their lives ruined. Many left permanently scarred, their minds broken. One Dutch noblewoman gave birth 9 months later, swearing her child had no father's face, a testament to the horror she endured. When Maria Cristina gave birth to a daughter, Isabella, Ferdinand refused to hold her. He claimed she carried a mirror curse, that looking into her innocent eyes showed him all his past crimes, a reflection of his own monstrous soul. He later allowed a portrait to be painted of her, but had the face scratched out, defiling the image of his own child. When the artist protested, the king, in a fit of rage, ordered his hands broken so he may never reveal a monster again. Convinced that pain made him divine, Ferdinand commissioned a literal crown of thorns made of twisted gold and iron. He wore it secretly under his royal regalia during important ceremonies, bleeding quietly beneath his robes, a hidden agony. During Mass, His servants saw blood drip onto the marble floor, a crimson stain on the sanctity of the church. He called it sacred proof of my right to rule, a blasphemous justification for his torment. Maria Christina, exhausted and utterly broken, eventually fought back, her last act of defiance. She began documenting everything: dates, acts, names. She even smuggled letters to the Vatican and the Austrian court, desperate for help. When Ferdinand discovered this betrayal, he locked her in the North Tower for weeks, a prisoner in her own palace. She emerged barely alive, a shadow of her former self. But the letters survived, and decades later, they would provide the first real, undeniable evidence of the horrors within the Spanish court. Desperate for an heir, Ferdinand announced his queen was pregnant. But there was no child. Midwives were brought in to care for the womb of Spain, but found nothing, only emptiness. He insisted she was carrying a divine child, conceived by will, not flesh. After 9 months of this grotesque charade, he staged a funeral for the unborn Prince of Heaven. Attendees were forced to mourn or face exile, their grief a performance for a mad king. In his final years, Ferdinand reportedly spent hours speaking to his reflection, his only companion. One servant recorded a moment when he confessed, his voice raspy with madness. "I was born to ruin saints. My kingdom is not Spain, but suffering." He'd fall to his knees and beg the mirror for forgiveness, then curse it violently, trapped in a cycle of self-loathing and rage. Some say he cracked every mirror in the palace before his death, unable to bear his own reflection. Ferdinand VII died in 1833, bloated and utterly paranoid. His last days were filled with fevered dreams, shouting about angels who licked fire and children with hollow eyes. His chamber was sealed, its secrets locked away. His mechanical doll was buried with him, according to secret orders, a final grotesque companion. The Velvet Theater was burned, its dark stage consumed by flames, and Spain exhaled, a collective sigh of relief. But his legacy, of obsession, perversion, and power twisted beyond recognition, would haunt the corridors of history forever. To this day, no monarch in Europe has matched the strange depravity of Ferdinand VII. His palaces were later renovated, repainted, and blessed. But local lore says that on certain nights, soft cries echo through the halls, and paintings blink in empty rooms, forever watching. In sealed Vatican archives, copies of Maria Christina's letters remain, marked never to be released. And somewhere in a private collection, a cracked porcelain doll still smiles, a silent witness to unspeakable horrors. The king is dead, but the mask remains.